Springs rise in the chalk hills, from filtered rain through strata of sea creatures crushed under tropical seas, to feed the precious stream. A rare and delicate ecosystem, half hidden, half forgotten, covered over, polluted, neglected, and under threat. This is the story of the Chalgrove Brook.
The hills around Watlington have a secret. They are the source of one of the world's few chalk streams, the Chalgrove Brook. It flows through the Oxfordshire countryside, obscure and apparently unremarkable. But take a closer look and we find a rare and sensitive ecosystem under threat from all sides. So what is a chalk stream? How did it get here and why should we even care?
So what distinguishes a chalk stream is the fact that the water comes from springs out of chalk, and although the Chiltern Hills forms a part of a strip of chalk geology stretching from East Anglia into northern France, that's it for the whole globe. And so although they're quite common locally, they are internationally rare.
So the story of the chalk has a very long story. So 50 million years ago, when the African plate would have collided with the European plate, that would have been the event which actually caused the rocks to buckle upwards. The ripples from that collision of those two plates would have caused the chalk beds to become folded, and where we have this upfold, then that's actually formed the Chilterns, where the chalk streams flow from.
I'm here on my allotment where I found these two worked Stone Age flints, which are probably the first indication we have of people living here in Watlington. But why were they here? It's all down to the geology of the Chiltern Hills.
Watlington lies at the junction between the chalk escarpment and the clay vale. Clay is an impermeable rock, so at that junction, it will actually rise up in springs. Also, when the water fills the chalk and the chalk becomes saturated, the water table will rise, so the chalk will actually form springs on the surface of the ground where the chalk actually lies.
And those springs are important as a source of drinking water, going back thousands of years. When I found these two stones, the first thing I looked for was a reason why were they here. And there's a spring which actually, when it's very wet, comes up right through the allotment. This ancestor sat here next to a spring, and of course the reason he was there, he wanted to hunt, so the water would have attracted animals down from the dry hills above.
And the fact that Watlington exists at all where it does geographically is because of the chalk stream, and so it's fundamental to Watlington and to its history, really.
When people first settled alongside them, the water quality was really good. They were full of fish for eating. And things like watercress, which you could also eat. So, you know, what's not to love about a chalk stream?
As time went on, we developed water mills. All told, there were probably half a dozen mills along the length of the Chalgrove Brook.
So the water from the chalk streams was a really important economic asset for the springline settlements of our area.
Where the water comes to the surface of springs, for human purposes, we tend to develop ponds because then it has more water for use. And so the horse pond and the willow pond, which are well known here in Watlington, were probably developed for watering animals, for washing animals, and then the willow pond in particular, there's a rumour that was used as a trout pond for fishing. And eventually, though, we replaced all of these with other sources, so the importance of the springs gradually diminished. So the Chalgrove Brook is formed of a number of springs. They coalesce as they leave Watlington, and the stream then flows away through Cooksome onto Chalgrove,
where it splits into two channels and goes round the town, round the back of it, and through a channel alongside the road. Goes along to Stadhampton,
And then beyond there at Chiselhampton, it joins the River Thame. And along the way, it's joined by other tributaries.
The River Thame then becomes a tributary river of the River Thames. So all these little streams do play their part in a much larger river network.
It's the headwaters themselves here which can be defined as being chalk streams, but that doesn't mean that the rest of the brook is not a valuable habitat. So chalk streams are rare, but what is it that makes them so special and important for biodiversity?
Because they're coming out from the aquifer, they're a very cool temperature, between 10 and 11 degrees, and they stay pretty much constant like that through the system, as long as they're still fed from the groundwater.
And this stability of temperature means that particular species can adapt to cope with those conditions.
As soon as the main water in the stream is fed from overland flow or from sewage treatment works, which are implicated in that, the temperature rises and they lose that very precious ecology that they have in their upper reaches. When they're in really good condition, they're gin clear.
And this is because it is emanating from the chalk, and so it's been filtered over many years, potentially hundreds of years, and means that it supports particular types of invertebrate and other species which can't survive in more polluted waters.
They're seasonal and can dry up in their upper reaches when the water table drops.
And there are some specialist invertebrates which rely on streams which predictably and regularly dry up in summer, very specialist invertebrates.
Another feature of chalk streams is that they're very gently flowing.
So it really relies on that change between seasons where when the aquifer rises and you've got enough water flow in there to clear out the gravels and keep the sediments flowing and keep the central thalwag through the channel, which is that lovely meander you get through the main channel that keeps motion, and it oxygenates the water as it goes over riffles, and then you get little pools scoured out.
So these characteristics of chalk streams mean that you can get a very specialised ecosystem.
You've got the beautiful water crowfoots, the whole ranunculus family, of which are characteristic of chalk streams, the false watercress and the true watercress, and lots of other plants growing in there which have sort of little flea beetles that live inside them, and the flea beetles will eat the diatoms, filter the diatoms out of the water, and then you'll get the small fish fry eating the flea beetles and all sorts of things. So it's this whole ecosystem living in the river system, and that's why they're so good for fish. People associate a healthy chalk stream with big brown trout, which is true, because they are sensitive to pollution incidents. They do need a good habitat. They do need clear water, and they need the flow of the water. So the three things that make our chalk streams survive as they are essential to brown trout. Chalk streams are really incredibly rare across the world. We need to look after them. They are culturally, historically, ecologically massively important.
But our chalk streams are under threat.
So the Chalgrove Brook is really degraded along a lot of its length. In fact, it's classified as a poor river by the Water Framework Directive and the Environment Agency.
And this degradation is because of a number of different issues.
You've got your water quality, you've got your habitat issues, and you've also got water quantity and the flows.
And the thing everybody is very aware of is climate change.
Climate change is an issue for biodiversity everywhere.
We could have more events whereby the streams dry up. We've also seen at the other end that we're getting very intense rainfall events.
And the question is whether the chalk streams are adapted to take that kind of stress at a more frequent and greater intensity.
The water emerges from the springs at a very constant temperature, but once it's in the channels and the rivers, it is going to be subject to higher temperatures from the changing climate.
And that is just one extra factor on top of human pressures, pollution pressures, which mean that small populations of species are at risk of being lost completely.
The threats to the brook come in many forms. The most basic one is its physical change. If we continue to build over it, to straighten it, reducing the natural form of the brook.
Originally, with the area of Watlington with springs really in every field would have been an unmanageable place really to create a road. So you can understand how it all began, but a long stretch of stream underground essentially is a dead channel because fish and other life can't navigate from one end to the other. So it is not only that part of the stream which is rendered essentially valueless for nature, it is the bits either side as well.
You can see going along the Chalgrove Brook from Watlington down to Stadhampton, there are very, very few naturalised stretches of the stream where you see the meanders. It's a very high percentage of it has been either diverted round fields so that farmers can take crops to feed us, you know, fair enough, encouraged to do so. So they're in now deep channels which sometimes get dredged, they often get overshaded, so there's no light for the plant growth anymore. They've become disconnected from the floodplain, and so you don't have that dynamic system that creates the clean gravel beds for the fish to spawn on. So the habitat loss is really huge.
And then there are the issues of water quality and pollution.
Pollution comes in many forms. It comes from sewage treatment works. It comes from leaking septic tanks that have been poorly maintained.
Here in Watlington, all the road drainage connects into the stream. So when it rains, the entire content of the roads washes straight in, and that results in a flooding or very high velocities, and that can damage the organisms in the stream, it can erode the stream, and it can affect the water quality.
All the heavy metals that come off tyres and from exhaust systems are just washed into the chalk stream immediately.
Unfortunately, back in 2017, there was a pollution incident which killed all of the trout that were living in Watlington. The investigation that followed meant that we could identify that it was a toxic substance. It was clear that it had entered the brook through a road drain. Yes, unfortunately, people are just not aware that what you pour down a road drain goes to a watercourse.
You've also got agricultural runoff, where you've got bare land over winter. That can run off into the brook and cause lots of sediment problems, higher nitrates, higher phosphates, which impact the ecology of the stream.
And then there's litter.
It does tend to find its way into river systems.
When there's a flood, it all gets lifted up and deposited onto the farmer's fields, and the farmer then has to, when the flood retreats, make sure there's nothing there that his cattle will be damaged on. But the rubbish is really just a visible manifestation of a lot of other things that we throw in the river, which we don't see. All those pollutants that are not visible to the eye. If you think that you can see a plastic bottle, what else is there that's been deposited, washed down from upstream?
So the Chalgrove Brook is under threat from many challenges, from climate change, pollution, litter and loss of natural habitat, all of which are threatening the ability of the Chalgrove Brook to provide the right conditions for the species to live and thrive in it.
So it's really good news that communities alongside the river getting together to try and take action. Climate change issues are not going to be reversed any day soon. So we have to learn to adapt.
So part of the habitat work that we've been doing is to try and join up areas of good quality habitat and different subpopulations of trout in particular, so that if through effects of climate, extreme weather events or anything else means that they're lost from one particular area, they will be more easily able to recolonise from elsewhere.
There are issues with barriers in the Chalgrove Brook, and that means that the fish can't migrate up and down the length of the stream. Where we can't take the barrier out, we put a fish pass or like a fish ladder, like the one at Cookson Mill, which is sort of stepped up and the fish can go up in stages. Or we do a bypass channel.
So one of the options for improving the brook is to daylight sections which have previously been built over.
And if roadworks, engineering works is being done potentially in relation to new housing development, then every opportunity should be taken to bring stretches of the stream above ground.
Then we're looking at things like where the rivers are really exposed where we need to plant trees to shade them. Conversely, in other areas, we're opening them up to let the light in so that the vegetation can grow again. And it's striking these balances which are really important. So we've been doing some work along the brook to remove overhanging trees. The first stage we've had tree surgeons come in because it's a very tricky situation with overhead power lines. We then can bring the volunteers in who are keen to help to make brushwood bundles and to cut stakes which we can then securely fix in stream. It will provide habitat for fish, fry and invertebrates and create a good flow of water.
Volunteers are really important, and there's a whole variety of tasks that people can undertake if they're prepared to give up their spare time.
Volunteers have come to us really from all walks of life and all skill levels, and although some of the work is hard work, they really do enjoy seeing something as a result of their work.
Well, volunteers are hugely important. We work with volunteers for in-stream habitat work. We also work with volunteers when we need to clear bankside vegetation, particularly invasive species like Himalayan balsam. It's good for community spirit and health and well-being, and also they learn a bit about their local chalk streams.
Raising awareness is very important to get people engaged. So Watlington Environment Group and Watlington Climate Action Group reached out to local artists to see if they could help get the message across.
So art can produce an emotional response, and that can reach a wider number of people perhaps, those who don't necessarily think ecology or climate action is for them, but they can relate to a piece of art and be interested in finding out more perhaps as a result. By producing installations that attract attention, that stop people in their tracks hopefully, that make them think, oh my gosh, that's interesting or that's hideous, it doesn't matter. The point is people will be engaged by something they see, which is an interpretation of something from nature. And lots of our artists do feel very passionately, obviously, about the environment, and they're very involved with local environmental groups. So to be able to bring some of that skill to help the cause is really powerful. It's very positive.
It can seem a totally overwhelming issue to deal with the problems of polluted and degraded chalk streams. But if you can do it with a positive message, working through art, it somehow feels a bit more manageable. And it brings people together and say, we can do this small thing, we can do lots of small things, and then that adds up to a big thing.
So we thought it would be a great idea to make the chalk streams part of our August Bank Holiday Art Trail, and we're building this huge model brown trout which we're going to position outside the town hall as a way of really making a visual statement about the brown trout, who are the indicator species that we have in Watlington's chalk streams and how important they are. So Toby Trout, we've named him such. We're hoping it'll attract attention outside the town hall. You won't be able to miss it as the sun glints on all these CDs, and people will stop and say, what? What's all this about? And hence we can explain more about the chalk streams.
Working at the Stream and Ponds station at the Watlington Green Fair was great fun, and Toby the trout was absolutely marvellous, loved him, and he attracted so much attention. And I think using art and science together to engage and educate is the way that we're going to turn things like the chalk streams around, because the more people know about it and understand their local habitats, the more they'll care for them and the more they'll help fight to keep them protected.
For example, we were able to talk to people about Only Rain Down the Drain. So Only Rain Down the Drain is an initiative which is being supported by the Environment Agency to encourage people to realise that it is only rain itself that should be poured down a road drain. One of the ways that this is done is using the yellow fish as a logo in order to just remind people that perhaps they shouldn't be pouring something down that.
So, as head of geography at Icknield, then I feel that getting students out into the streams and actually doing some work with the streams is really, really important. It gives students an appreciation of what the stream has, and being in the stream you recognise the habitats it has, you recognise how the stream might be beneficial for wildlife, and the first step in understanding why we need to conserve these things is actually engaging with it and knowing what is there. So I think in the course of doing their rivers fieldwork that we do as a geography department, students then have a better understanding of the wildlife and the nature that lives there, And then that will give them long-term an incentive to actually look after these things and value it and want to conserve it as they get older.
So to protect and restore a habitat like the Chalgrove Brook takes lots of people working together. The landowners and environmental groups, communities and artists, the school children, individuals and funders, all starting to pay attention. Now it's not just paying attention, we actually need to take action, we actually need to do something.
So what can people do to help? Small actions that we can do is just to be aware of the fragility of the watercourse, the fact that anything that goes into it is going to flow through the gills of the invertebrates, through the gills of the fish, or it's going to affect the plants. And we can help in many ways through our actions and also by volunteering.
Just locally, what you can do is look after the water quality and the water flow. So you can just put 3 peas down the toilet. Peas, paper and poo, nothing else. Don't flush fats and oils down the sink to clog the drains. If you see litter, pick it up. If it's in a stream, pick it up. There's lots of small steps individuals can take that will make a difference, starting really with probably what you put down the toilet in your sink. Not glamorous, but it helps.
So my hope and vision for the future is that more people are aware of the brook, cherish it and make what effort they can to improve it, and that over time we gradually see a return to as natural a watercourse as possible.
Our hopes for the Chalgrove Brook in the immediate future are to get our trout back. We're keeping our fingers crossed that they will arrive this year and breed and restore our local population again.
It's so fantastic. We've got an interesting ecosystem on our doorsteps and we can study how that ecosystem works with this special and precious habitat.
I hope that we can restore water quality, we can restore the water flow, and we can restore the habitat where possible. If we can restore as much as we can to get the trout back, the brook lamprey back, the kingfishers flying up the brooks, and the dragonflies flying over the land, that would be fabulous.
Springs rise in the chalk hills from filtered rain through strata of sea creatures crushed under tropical seas to feed the precious stream. A rare and delicate ecosystem, its existence remembered, uncovered, protected, treasured, and restored. This is the story of the Chalgrove Brook.